motion?
So moved.
Williams and then Janet.
Second.
Yep, second. All right. Roll call?
Trustee Williams?
Aye.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
President Wodnicki?
Yes. Okay, the floor is yours, Janet.
On the consent agenda, we had two different items where there apparently a scrivener's error indicating that both the person making the motion and the person seconding the motion were the same. So in referring to item 4C, both Williams made the motion, but Williams seconded the motion for resolution R24-10. And we had a similar problem a little further down in 6B, where Burson made the motion and also seconded the motion for ordinance 24-17. So clearly a little bit to be sorted out. So I'd like to remove this, not just from the consent agenda, but to give the clerk an opportunity to sort it out.
Do I need a motion on that? No.
I mean, you're already supposed to approve it.
Yeah. Can we just table this particular item?
Sure, yeah, okay. We'll table 4A, and we've already approved the consent agenda.
So I'll
with the
move to table
exception of
4A.
4A. Okay, second? Second by Williams. Roll call?
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Williams?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
President Wodnicki?
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Trustee Burson. Moving on to staff reports and Police Department, Chief Levand.
Thank you. Your activity report, that'll be the next board meeting, so that'll be your numbers. Trick or treat in the village was a success, no problems, no concerns. The department, along with CERT, handed out over 50 pounds of candy to the trick or treaters. I'm sure the parents love us for that. So thanks to CERT members, including Kim, who assisted the police department and community by providing extra patrols. They're always a hit, so a lot of the families out there like seeing them, and it's a good supplement to the police department. Last week, police department added 2 new safe exchange zone signs. They're in the front lot facing the driveway there. So anyone not familiar, we're a little behind the times on it. Safe exchange zones are exactly that. It's made for child custody issues and usually e-commerce or internet sales. So there's 24-hour video surveillance outside here. So it affords people the opportunity, especially with scams nowadays. No one that's pulling a scam is going to want to come to the police department village hall under video surveillance and try to rip someone off. So it was a good thing to have. I want to thank the highway department. They're the ones that posted it for us. So those are out there and it's advertised on the village website. So it's a good opportunity. And if anyone ever needs the police, we don't interact in those transactions, but if they need us, we'd be more than happy to go out there and stand by. Our agency began hosting, or has begun starting tomorrow, training classes through NEMERT, which is a training facilitator for law enforcement. So our first class will be here tomorrow. That's on autism training. And then on 11/22, we're going to host a search and seizure class. So a lot of the remodel was nicely done. This room was nicely done. It affords us the opportunity to do that in a nice location. And the benefit to us is every class we host, we get 2 free admissions, so we get to send 2 officers at no charge. So it's free training for us. The officers we don't have to pay for them to go, and it's here, so we don't have to pay for them to travel to a different location. So it's a win-win for everyone. There's been some social media questions. So I try to come up with, we have limited resources when it comes to officers. We have 2 cars a shift. We have problems all over, including speeding. We've addressed this over the last couple board meetings. So there's been some social media posts out there. I have a decoy car that I use. It is a marked patrol car. So what I do is I move this decoy car to different areas in the village, most recently LaFox Road, and the car sometimes is occupied, sometimes the car is not occupied, it could be occupied for a mannequin in a police uniform. So people think that they catch on to this and they're smart to this, but it's going to be very costly for them, because this is why. I moved the car to a location. 2 days later, we go sit in the car, who they think no one's in the car, and we write them speeding tickets. This is an opportunity for us to use the limited resources we have to try to curb the speeding problem that is going on in the village. So it is up to the residents and visitors if they want to roll the dice and guess if there is an officer sitting in that car or not. But we've taken some backlash for it on social media lately, and it's actually an excellent resource for us to use, and it's actually done very well so far. So you never know where the decoy car might be placed in the village or who might be in the car. But we do issue citations for the speeding based off of that car. I asked all motorists to use extreme caution when driving on the roadways right now. So in the last 2 weeks, we've had 7 car versus deer accidents. The deer are gone crazy. It's only going to get worse over the next 2 months. So if you go the speed limit, you pay attention, and you use some caution, then you might have a better chance of avoiding the deer that are running like crazy across the roads right now.
Which is the main road that,
2, always is. Route 64, just east of Brown Road, and Coron Road between McDonald and Silver Glen. Every year it's the same, and actually 64 in Brown is slightly worse than what Coron Road is. So it's already picked up, and it'll continue to go up as probably through January, usually into January, February, it sort of slows down for us, so. The police department, I want to say thanks to the Fire and Police Commission. They recently did a lateral hiring process for us. So out of the candidates that tested, there was one candidate that came out extremely well for one of the full-time positions. The next board meeting, he will be sworn in. His name is Michael Berth. He has over 20 years of experience. He's been a detective, most recently a sergeant. So he's filling a spot that we have open that is there. It's going to be much needed for the department. He completed the entire hiring process that we discussed previously. That's the background investigation, polygraph test, physical, drug test. He did the whole thing. So he did excellent, so he'd be a good addition. And then just one more reminder, Holiday in the Hills again is December 6th, 3 to 6 p.m. here at the Village Hall. Tree lighting, crafts, choir, refreshments, Coda, and Santa Claus and all his friends. And that is all I have, unless there's any questions.
any questions for Chief Levand? No? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Chief. All right, number 6, action items. We don't have any. And we'll move on to 7, discussion items. A, ICC building code update.
And this is a short update, just asking for 2 things, that we select the recommendation the staff would be making with, in conjunction with BNF Technical, is to go to the 2021 ICC code with amendments. I don't have all the amendments done because, as you know, we have part-time staff and we use BNF Technical, so I'm asking for up to $5,000 to pay them for the additional fees to give us the different ICC recommendation on amendments to adopt that. And the other reason we do this, so the people at home know, is that FEMA, in its wisdom, has put out a proclamation federally that they will not grant reimbursements if you're 2 codes behind in the ICC. So 2024 or the 2021, and talking it over with limited staff and the BNF Technical, that most of the communities are choosing 2021 because some of the issues haven't all been resolved with the 2024 recommendation. So we'd be best, and we need to do amendments, of course, because we've got well and septic. That is not the standard of one size fits all across America. So there's other things like that that we want to bring forth, but I need consensus that 2021, and that I can spend up to $5,000 with BNF, and if it's more, I'll come back. But we need to move on this because the date for adoption is supposed to be January 1st of 25, but I don't think the code police are going to come out and start fining communities for not doing it. But the danger is if you have declared emergency for a snowstorm or some kind of natural disaster, you might not get reimbursement. So we should move on this just as a best practice.
Okay, Janet, did you have something?
I did. So with these code updates, I think the issue that Administrator Rooney is referring to, but we should flesh out a little bit, is that the difference between 2021 and 2024, or any other two different versions of it that you were to pick, is that there are a variety of new expectations in the newest version. And so if you adopt that newest version, and if you don't like two of those things, you can say, well, I want to exclude those. But if you don't like 10 of those things, or 20 of those things, it starts to become a bit of a bigger process, both for the village to decide what those things are, right? And then for the board to decide what we are or aren't going to exclude. And so this comes about because these building codes become more and more stringent over time, and well-intentioned people want us to build our houses to the best possible standard, which is great, except that for people in particular that are trying to do remodeling work or maintenance work, put additions and such things on their houses, this can really become a challenge. So, I don't know that as a village we have a problem with requiring people building an entire new subdivision to be up to the latest standards. But overall, as a village, we have a large housing stock, and so we would need to make significant exclusions from the 2024 building codes, as I understand it, significantly greater than we would have to do in the 2021 codes. But even in the 2021 codes, in conversations with Trustee Boatner, there are some other issues that we should be thinking of in terms of what the scope is, in terms of any particular interaction that one of our residents has. And so, Trustee Boatner has brought to my attention a number of occasions where a resident could come to us with a pretty routine request, and the 2021 and 2024 codes would suggest to us a degree of scope creep that would get the resident into doing significantly more work than they had bargained for. And so Trustee Boatner has recommended some pretty simple amendments that we would be able to avail ourselves of that might help our residents while they're just trying to do maintenance work in their homes and not get caught up in the property maintenance aspects of some of these codes.
Okay, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the intro, Janet. But when we are looking at these newer codes, it's really important that the residents and everybody understands that, these really what they end up doing is they become more restrictive. They put into place really more effort that the homeowners, contractors, and the village have to do. And I put together quite a few different examples to kind of illustrate that. But for example, with like window replacements, these can all of a sudden now trigger wall insulation upgrades. Where now with the new energy standards, at least in the 2021, which is what we're looking to change to, there's two sections which require wall insulation upgrades when windows are removed and replaced. So this all of a sudden can trigger these major conflicts where a homeowner is looking to have 30 windows in their home replaced, and next thing you know, a nice simple quote from their contractor, inspector comes out, says your insulation's not up to code and you fail. These are things where now the homeowner says, contractor, how did you not know this? Contractor says, village, what in the world are you doing to me? And there's a handful of others, for instance, a roof replacement. Now, this is in 2024. I didn't look this one up in 2021, but I think it's similar. But when you are replacing a roof, the attic must also be brought up to the current insulation standards, which is R49. And most of our homes built in the 70s, there's lots of neighborhoods with older homes. I mean, there's a very good chance that, there's not a ton of insulation up there, which it's a great thing to suggest to a homeowner. This all makes a ton of sense, but it's really, I feel it is not the village's place to demand that homeowners now re-insulate their attic, tear out their walls when they need to replace their windows, and re-insulate their exterior walls. I put a document together which I could forward, to Tracy if you want to add it to the minutes. But I also put together an idea for an amendment that could accompany, these updated building codes, and it's just a paragraph, and I'll read it. But to ensure fair and reasonable application of the 24 or 21, whichever to be determined, building codes for any residential remodel, renovation, or alteration project undertaken by homeowners shall be limited in scope to the intended modifications requested in the permit application. Compliance with the ICC building code shall apply only to the specific areas affected by the proposed work and shall not require unrelated upgrades or modifications to other parts of the building or systems that are not directly part of the planned project. There's a little bit more to it, but that kind of gives the general scope. So
That gives us good direction staff-wise to work with BNF. The other part, I want to use BNF for this because, as you probably know, Nick, Trustee Boatner, the governor signed some energy code requirements on windows and roof that you have to really work to get an amendment to opt out of some of the state mandates. And so we're going to use them to look at those issues and find out where we can opt out or we are boxed in. And I need the people that do it every day and for multiple jurisdictions to look at that. And we'll certainly keep that in mind as we look at different amendments, because you have a series of amendments on your 2012. And it's not going to be passed by staff. It's going to come back to you as a board to vote on. So I'll keep that in mind as I draft the different amendments to propose. Staff propose, you pass as a group.
Well, I think, let's get
I'm
to.
sorry, were you? I didn't even look over
No,
your
you go
list.
ahead.
I'm sure.
Time.
Yeah, when
Go
you
ahead.
are going into this, though, I would just be curious about what that conversation would be like without these amendments, when someone comes in and proposes to replace a roof or to replace the windows in their home or to do any of these renovations. And without an amendment like this, we're going to potentially go back to a homeowner and give them a list of other things that they have to do in their home to accomplish simple home maintenance tasks. Another approach to something like this would be to eliminate completely a lot of these home maintenance type projects when we're going in to do these amendments. Like, we could come up with a list. I've proposed lots of lists in the past. But that could be a very nice way to bypass a lot of this very, very complicated procedures that folks are going to have to go through with these new building codes. That's it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Tom.
As to you saying you're pursuing that, I would say yes, pursuing
Good.
the amount to pay for that, to find out what's going on. In light of what he's saying too, I also don't want anybody that's going to do a window job in their house and have it turn into a $50 million project. I think that's really not good. So if we can include something that would include kind of the wordage, and I guess you'd have to speak to everyone about that, but I would have consensus myself to say that I think we can move forward with this.
And that,
Thank you,
and that's
Tom.
why we're picking 21, because there's going to be less need for some amendments. But
Yes.
I caution you that the state has put some of these mandates in, and it's a result of political pressure, and that's what the ICC does respond to, and they've adopted a lot of energy codes as part of some federal legislation that's come down in the last 2 years, too. So there may be, we will look at what we can amend to keep that theme of not increasing costs, but I can tell you that there's going to be some limitations of what you can opt out of.
We could
on the
move
energy.
Campton Hills out of Illinois, but I don't think it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, one last comment, and we'll move on.
The notion of opting out of particular aspects of ICC code books, the whole collection of them, is not new. In fact, in 2012, we opted out of a number of different provisions.
I agree.
And most communities do. So it's not only not unusual, but it's appropriate for the village to opt out of certain provisions. For example, I think we're in general agreement that we don't want to require builders to have to put in sprinklers in residential construction for a variety of reasons that involve more practicality than safety, right? So opting out of things is not unusual.
That one you still can do.
Right, and so we went through a process before in 2012 of deciding what made sense for our village and what didn't. And I trust that Administrator Rooney and the staff will go through that process with the 2021, which is, I think, the version that we're trying to develop consensus for, and make sure that it aligns with not just these specific concerns that Trustee Boatner's brought up, today, but also the general issue of replacement and maintenance work and what permits and inspections and so forth are required for that type of work.
Okay, do we have a consensus then to move forward on this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, discussion items 7B, we've all been waiting for this. The draft of the zoning ordinance, zoning commission recommendation review. And we'll turn it, go ahead.
Yeah, and just want to
Mhm.
tell the audience, it's not like give and take questions from the audience to, this is a board meeting for your discussion. It's not for action tonight, but it's to hear it. And I think we'd get better progress if we can just hold questions till the end of the overview and that. And then folks at home, if you have questions about it, it's this notes and from the last two zoning commission meetings are available on the webpage, and they're very enlightening, and that same review has been taking place. So with that, Jim Brown is here to give us the 10-month, almost 11 months of action by the zoning commission to get to the,
Right. We do have the chairman of the zoning commission here this evening. I don't know if he wanted to speak? No? Okay, all right, just wasn't sure. All right, so a presentation, this is very similar to two other presentations I've given. The first one was at the Zoning Commission's October 9th meeting. The audience for that was the Zoning Commission. A second presentation, very similar to that October 9th one, was at the public hearing. There the audience was the public. And now this one's been modified. A lot of the slides are the same. There's some newer ones, and the audience is the village board. So, get started here. The zoning commission, come on, there, hit it right there. Okay, so the zoning commission forwarded 3 documents: the report, which outlines what they did, and this presentation tonight covers a lot of the key points in the report. The zoning ordinance itself, the text, and then a zoning map. So those are the 3 documents they recommended unanimously for approval at the October 30th meeting. So I'll start with what remains the same from the 2023 ordinance. That's our starting point. And then I'll go into some of the key topics at the public hearing, and then I'll finish with a deeper review of those, some of those same topics and a few more thrown in. Okay, so what remains the same? The zoning districts are all the same. We did not, they did not create any new districts. They did not delete any districts from the 2023 ordinance. All the dimensional standards are the same for each of those districts, except the lot coverage for farming districts was changed, but the setbacks, the maximum building height, impervious surface coverage, lot coverage, those are all the same. And the articles dealing with the zoning administration, enforcement, et cetera, those are essentially the same. Some wordsmithing, some rearrangement, but essentially the same. And then articles on landscape standards, off-street parking, and signs, essentially unchanged. The sign article was reorganized, significantly reorganized, but all of the provisions as far as the size, maximum sizes of signs, and what type of signs you could have and what locations, that was unchanged. Off-street parking, I don't think we really touched at all. The landscape standards, we did add requirement for a tree preservation plan. So if someone came in with a planned unit development or other larger development, they would have to submit a tree preservation plan. So the public hearing was held at Bell Graham School on the 23rd, and we had 96 chairs set up. I thought most of them were full. Mr. Rooney thought about, I don't know, 15 or 20 were empty. There were people kind of coming and going, a few people standing in the back, but, you know, somewhere between, say, probably 85 and 100 people at the hearing. And this is some of the concerns raised. The first, I think a lot of people came to hear about property taxes. They wanted to speak on it. Our first public speaker was the township assessor. And I think he assuaged a lot of people's fears, so we had maybe only one or two comments related to property taxes. He engaged in kind of a brief Q&A with some of the people there. Mm-hmm. And after he was done and he took his seat, I don't think we heard about property taxes again. There was some concern with this farm to residential zoning that would increase people's property taxes, and he said that is not the case. They do not use zoning in any way, shape, or form in doing the assessments. There was several people had comments relating to they thought the village was up to something. They were really suspicious of village intentions. They thought the zoning rewrite was being done in preparation for something else coming. There was some big development coming. One person said, you know, I'm from Chicago. I grew up there. When I hear zoning change, I think there's a developer, someone wants to make money, and they're lining up the aldermen. So there was a lot of comments on that. Other changes were coming. Boy, about 4 or 5 people commented on that. I will say we had about 24 people. It was 24 people commented. Okay, so 4 of the people commenting was pretty positive, and then the rest, 20 left over, and these are like the topics they hit. And some people hit more than one topic. Keeping of animals. This can be broken down into 2. I think a lot of people judged on what they were saying and how they described their properties. There was a misunderstanding of the changes being proposed. They still kept referring to maximum limits, or now that they would not be able to have animals. I think maybe that farm to residential rezoning, they would have gotten a public notice letter on that. I think that confused them, and they didn't realize that it probably was not changing for them. And then there was other comments on just concern about nuisances, especially roosters, and I'll go into this deeper in a moment. But those were the kind of the way the keeping of the animal comments broke out. All right, homesteading. So first I had to go figure out what this was. I mean, I kind of knew, and 1 or 2 people commented on homesteading. It's just a lifestyle based on self-sufficiency, craftsmanship, and emergency preparedness. Again, I think a misunderstanding. One person thought that these zoning changes would inhibit or prevent her from leading this homesteading lifestyle. And I can't remember the size of her lot. It was maybe an acre. And there's really nothing that would prevent anyone from having a large vegetable garden, orchards, you know, chickens, roosters, whatever. So again, I think that was just based on not fully understanding what was afoot. Okay, so, yeah, if you want to can your vegetables or have your chickens in your backyard or whatever, you can do that. Setbacks, again, I could kick myself for this because I didn't adequately explain it in my presentation. In fact, I may have added to the confusion. The setbacks, again, we didn't touch that, but if you got this letter saying you were going to be rezoned from farm to residential, in certain cases, there were consequences for that because the setbacks for the farm district and RE1 or RE2 or whatever, you could have been different. And what I really didn't elaborate on, for the most part, setbacks refers to the position or the location of the primary structure on the lot. So that's already there. So it's not going to affect their future plans at building. Maybe in addition it might. And then for accessory structures, it's really a 10-foot rule. There's a couple accessory structures up there. 10 feet from the lot lines. There's a table that says, you know, where you can put a shed. You can't put a shed in your front yard. Where you can put a garage or whatever. And the general standard is 10 feet from any lot line. Chicken coops are 15 feet. There are a few exceptions. So again, any zoning change would not be affecting that. And I don't think I adequately explained that. A couple people said, oh, I've lived here, you know, for so long and I've had these plans and now you're pulling the rug out from under my plans because you're changing the setbacks. And that's probably not true. Probably not true. I did talk to one gentleman after one of our meetings, and he actually I think his property was being zoned to R2, which was going to be restrictive. And it was going to inhibit his case. He had his house way over to one side where the driveway was, and he wanted to build a garage, and it would impact the placement of that garage. But that's what variances are for. He can still go through the variance process. I think he would have a good case to meet the standards for it. So it's not the end of the world, and they might be able to get their desired structure in a desired location. HOA open space. We had a public comment on this tonight. There were several people from Fox Mill there, including the vice president of the HOA, and a couple of concerns. His initial comments said that, indicated that the presentation I had given had kind of assuaged some of the concerns that he had, but the main thing that they drove home was they had areas that were open to the public, and then they had areas that were private, and somehow they wanted that designated on the map. Parking of large vehicles, RVs, et cetera, trailers, probably, I think the largest number of comments were directed at this. And it was hard to tell if this was just a general comment, or people, again, thought with the farm to residential rezoning that they thought that they could no longer have commercial vehicles or large vehicles on their lot. But again, I'll cover this here in a second. So significant changes. I'd like to cover some of these issues more in depth now and throw in one or two other ones. I'll start, it's not alphabetical, I guess I'm starting with A though. Accessory dwelling units. You probably can't read that chart, but I'm going to go through it. That chart is in the report that was forwarded by the commission, so you can see that. It gives kind of what the item is, and then the 2023 ordinance, and then if it was changed or not, and if so, how. So it breaks that out. So attached ADUs, they're currently allowed. They're still allowed in the draft. There's a couple new provisions. They have to have a separate exit, and they have to have a party wall at least 20 feet in length. That provision is to try to keep people from avoiding the attached ADU, and actually have a detached one by connecting with the breezeway. That's why that's in there. And then detached ADUs, these are not allowed in the 2023 ordinance. The draft allows them. I'll note that there was, I think, considerable debate at the commission level on this. They are allowed with conditions. The maximum square footage for a detached ADU is 900 square feet. The maximum height is 20 feet. Has to be 20 feet from a lot line, has to be 30 feet from the principal structure. It can be above a garage. So the detached ADUs are allowed in the draft. The keeping of animals. I'd like to dive into this. This was the chart, one of the charts in the 2023 ordinance, and it gives the maximums per zoning district for two different categories of animals, horses and other large animals, and then he had smaller animals. And this is what we heard a public speaker tonight referring to this, and this is what was really taken out. All right, boom, come on, there's my X there, X mark, got rid of that. Okay, so there's still, I do want to say, there's kind of a backdoor in on a couple of animals, for example, chickens. The coop and the run, you have to have a minimum of 10 square feet per chicken, and you have a maximum for all your chicken coops of 120 square feet. So effectively, what's that, like 12 chickens you could have, you know? So there is kind of a backdoor way in on this. And then this is kind of a
Well,
comparison.
and Jim, just to be clear,
Yeah.
if you have enough land, you could have 2 chicken coops, 2 runs, so you could have,
No, the maximum chicken coop is 120. They can have 2 chicken coops, but the total has to be 120.
yeah.
Yeah, or the
The
runs.
run.
Yeah. So it comes out to 120 max.
We're going to discuss after.
yeah.
H- Hang on to that thought, Jan.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is, you can take a look here, I'll leave this up for a while. I was accused at the public hearing of going through the slides too fast, so don't want to do that again. 2023 chart is on top, and then you see a new chart from the draft, 2024. So the areas where all of these animals were allowed expanded to include all the way down to R4 for bees and chickens and roosters, and the horses are not allowed in R2, R3, and R4. I think the R2 lot size is, I think it's 15,000 square feet. That's a pretty small lot. So, and then barnyard animals, I didn't know what to call this category. I was trying to recategorize these. Barnyard just seemed appropriate. IDNR uses fur-bearing animals, but that's more for hunting. I thought there might be some confusion on that. And the barnyard animals actually includes things like geese. So it's not just mammals with fur. So that's what we came up with. All right, next slide. So the keeping of animals in the draft, all right? Roosters are allowed in all zoning districts where chickens are allowed, which is just about every place in town. We can still, the village can still cite them for nuisance control. They have to manage. The expectation is that they would manage the crowing of the roosters, and that we would then cite them if the roosters were still being a problem, that we would cite them under the nuisance code. All right. There was a change to the public notice requirements. Actually, there are several changes. Probably the most significant is the distance that you have to send letters, public notice letters, to all the property owners. This is, a state statute is 250 feet. Our ordinance is 500. The commission, with one exception of a liaison, I think agreed on to lower that to 250 to meet the state statute. The one person who was against it just thought, given our large lots, that it should remain at 500. And then there were other changes just on the responsibility of who does what. Some of the responsibility is now with the applicant. That's the mailing of the letters. The zoning officer would still supply the text of the letter, and it would be their responsibility to mail them out to everyone within 250 feet. And staff would also supply the addresses to them, all right? Accessory structure rules changed. There was a limit to detached accessory structures, and there was a lot of exceptions to that rule. That was taken out. And then the other rule was just on the maximum footprint of the aggregate of those accessory structures, detached roofed accessory structures. And there you see kind of the middle of the slide is what's in the 2023 ordinance. And the commission just went with a 2%, or 500 square feet, whichever is greater. And I think in virtually all cases, all lot sizes, that is much more generous. Parking of large vehicles. This is section 9-9 from the current ordinance. It's now 11-9. Language in this did not change. And interestingly, I went back and reread this today, and it says pickup trucks are not, these standards don't apply to pickup trucks, but if you read another provision, it talks about 1-ton trucks. King County uses 3/4-ton trucks. So again, if I were administering the zoning ordinance, I would use the most restrictive provision, which would be the 1-ton truck. So we should actually probably go clean that up. Just noticed that tonight. So the 2023 ordinance used a 1-ton truck classification as the threshold for the keeping of commercial vehicles in a residential district. Okay? 1 ton. What's 1 ton mean, you may ask? It's not defined in the ordinance. Janet sent me something. If you want to read that whole text, but the important part is down at the bottom. In general, a 1/2-ton truck is considered light duty. 3/4-ton truck, which was the Kane County ordinance, which we had up until 2023, was the max. And then a 1-ton truck is a heavy-duty truck. So I think that would be something like an F-350 would be considered heavy-duty. I think F-150 would not be that, so you'd be okay. And I said something at the public hearing that I don't think was quite correct. First, I misspoke. The King County ordinance was 3/4-ton truck. We went to 1-ton truck. I think I said we kept the 3/4-ton truck. That's not correct. All right. So this is what we have now in the draft. So we went with a different threshold, and we went back and tweaked this a little bit, but this is taken from the draft now. The storage or keeping of non-commercial trucks with B or C plates is permitted. The storage or keeping of commercial trucks with C, D, or higher, there's F, H, whatever, is prohibited. We're talking about residential districts here. Okay. And then just for your curiosity, there's the limit. That's hard to read, but this is from the Secretary of State's site. The B-plated trucks, 8,000 or less, and we get up in the C and D. C is over 8,000, and then the D is over 10,000. All right. Okay, and then recreational vehicles. Again, this language didn't really change. The paragraphing and the numbering kind of changed, but it's essentially the same thing. You can still have it on your residential lot. You can enclose it in a structure. You can put it on the side yard behind the front of the building. You put it in the rear yard. You can actually put it in the front if it's behind the setback, the required setback for that district. So if it's 30 feet, so long as it's in the driveway and it's 30 feet from the lot line, you can have it there. So we didn't change that language at all. All right. Permitted and special use tables, there were changes made to this. Some of the definitions were slightly changed. Some of the, we added new categories. But I can't think of anything really significant that we changed. I'm sure someone's going to bring something up here, but again, we can dive into this if you want. For the moment, I'll just move on. Home-based businesses, we did not change at all. For the conditions, we added 2 lists. So these are the conditions that were in the 2023 ordinance, and I think all of these are still, they are all in the 2024 draft. Have to be conducted by a resident of the property. They can employ a maximum of 2 people. Family members not included in that. Outdoor storage or outdoor activities are prohibited. No toxic, explosive, radioactive, corrosive materials allowed. You can't be creating greater vehicular or pedestrian traffic than what you would normally find in a residential area. And you can't alter the residential character. So you can't add an addition on your house that's not residential in character, all right? So, and that's paraphrasing from the ordinance. And then you can't generate noise, fumes, vibrations, electrical interference, or garbage, again, beyond what's normal for a residential district. Okay? And then there were two lists that were added. One gave, and it's not intended to be all-inclusive, but it gave things that were outright prohibited. You know, eating and drinking, I don't know why that's in there, why I put that in there, but you need a liquor license to do that. But you can't run like a little coffee shop out of your home, you know. Repair and maintenance of painting of motor vehicles, et cetera. Medical and dental clinics, although you can have like a professional, like if you're a psychologist or something, professional like that, that would be allowed. Okay. Moving on to the zoning map, on the left is our current map dating from 2014. The right is the map that the consultant Camiros prepared. It was dated April 2022. It was not adopted, but that served as kind of a good starting point for us as we went through and tried to really get our heads around the zoning map. And then we have the current zoning map that was slightly tweaked after the public hearing, and then we had that delivered on the day of our last meeting, 30 October, and there it is. So that's our starting point now. So I'm going to go through what we really looked at. We spent a lot of time on the Open Space Protection District. We added a protection to the name of the district. In the Farmland Protection District, mostly Open Space Protection District. And there's the purpose statement. I'll just summarize here. Really what we were trying to do when we mapped this out was protect these properties first and foremost, and then identify them, have them clearly identified. And that is kind of what led to the HOA properties being identified on the map. Okay? And we included all different types of open space, some of it public and some of it private. There's the Campton Township open space, Forest Preserve, Great Western Trail, the HOA open space, and then these other kinds, a couple other ones like Garfield Farm were thrown in. I'm going to talk more about the HOA in a second, all right? And then the Open Space Protection District. Again, this is not altering anyone's taxes. If it's being rezoned, it does not alter ownership, okay? I think there was a fear among Fox Mill, maybe a couple other HOAs, that somehow this was, we were going to take this over. It's not. It does not alter the ownership. And it does not make it public, okay? If it's private property, one of the basic rights of being a property owner is that you get to exclude others, so it does not alter that. The commercial zoning, we looked at Wasco area, just reviewed this. I wouldn't say there's any significant changes there, just kind of lined it up. PUDs, PUDs, there were no rezonings of that except for the open space. Initially, we thought we might want to, on the Camiros map, you know, when we started to look at that, the PUDs, such as Fox Mill, were rezoned from planned development to something like R4. We decided to leave that alone. If the village wants to pursue that, they can, but that would have to be done. That really is a very time-intensive process. Each PUD would have to be reviewed as per the approving ordinance, and then trying to figure out what would be the most appropriate zone in our scheme of things. And farm to residential rezoning, spoke about this. This is something that's been on the village's radar, I believe, for some time. It's mentioned once or twice in the comprehensive plan. It's shown on future maps that this should be, you know, these are residential. These are currently residential areas. They should be zone residential. So the commission went through each of these subdivisions, and they are residential subdivisions that had retained, for whatever reason, over a couple decades, going back to the King County, predating the village, had retained farm zoning. So we looked at each of these, and we examined them, and for the most part, I hate the phrase no-brainer, but I'm going to use it here. I mean, this was very obvious that these were not agricultural areas. They were not farms, and they should be rezoned to the appropriate residential district. And that was based on the minimum lot size of the majority of the lots in that area. Oh, I got the same slide in twice. And here's just an air photo. This is one of these residential subdivisions that is zoned farm right now. It's very obvious there's no farms there. This is estate residential. And then this is, I mentioned the comp plan, the existing land use map shows these areas as residential. They're taxed as residential as well. We went through these LaSalle factors. This is what the Illinois courts use for evaluating the validity of rezonings, and it's it incorporated in our ordinance for rezoning, so we used those as kind of an outline. We went through with those commercial properties that were rezoned and then F to R rezoning. I'm not going to go through all of these. I mean, I think this might be in your, it is in the report. In the back, there's an attachment, and for one of the commercial properties, and we went through, so. And then there were just basic nomenclature, name changes. You know, the Estate 1 is now Residential Estate 1. So that changed on the map. And then what's left was really just the farm zoning, and that remained the same. Okay. Barns and silos, I found it odd, you know, that a place like this had no mention in their zoning code of barns or silos. This was put in kind of a last-minute change. Really what it's just acknowledging that it's important to Campton Hills. And if someone has a barn or a silo, I mean an actual old-time wooden barn, and they are being rezoned, or we had a case today, someone was inquiring, and it's a barn and silo on it, and that property is zoned estate residential estate. Well, it's just saying that that barn is not going to be rendered non-conforming, okay, by its size. It's still a conforming structure, which means the owner can use it in different ways and maybe expand it even at a future date. So, and that was it. There's the Zoning Commission, all smiles. October 30th is the first meeting that we wound up at 8 o'clock. We didn't go to 8:30 or 8:45. And everyone was happy. It was a unanimous vote. Mm-hmm. So it's in your hands now. Please don't send it back to them. They'd like to be done. And that's it. So that's my presentation. I guess I'll take questions now, or Mark can help me with questions. So.
Well, this comes to the point, as a board, you have to decide how you want to eat this elephant called the zoning code with map. You can do it by chapter, you can do it by issue, and you could just go around the dais. I think that one that has generated a lot of interest by the trustees, and I think that you have kind of, Nick has talked to me about it and said he's spoken to one or two of you. If you would utter your short to the point correction on the plates and going from 3/4 ton, 1 ton to the easy for administration and for definition for the police or the zoning officer to go to a residence, we know what the Secretary of State's either put A, B, C, D. Nick, if you would, and I talked to Ed, who is on vacation, and he said he agreed with one caveat. If you would say 1 D plate per residential property, not a fleet of D plates. So Nick, if you would see if there's a consensus, I think we could easily take that one right away.
Sure, so what I had mentioned to you and some of the other trustees was that the C and D plates seem to be kind of skating around what the actual intention that we were trying to accomplish was, and it's not license plate categories, but it's really semi-trucks, open construction trailers, and large box and straight trucks. So by simply stating that and eliminating all of the C and D plate discussion, that would be one solution, would be to limit those type of vehicles. Or, you know, what we had, so here's kind of the dilemma since we talked, Mark, and so just hear me out. So originally it was eliminate those, but as I was thinking about this, you know, the fact is we do have to be very objective when we're doing this. And when we take away completely those type of vehicles, potentially what we're doing is we are unknowingly looking at a homeowner or a resident who's dependent on this vehicle for their income. When I stand at the end of my driveway, and I may have done this after I talked to you, but I can see 3 different homes that have 3 different styles of vehicles that they park in their driveway every day without complaint. So if we were to say that a particular commercial vehicle cannot be in someone's driveway, now all of a sudden this person has to find a place to park this vehicle. You know, we don't know what their situation is, and this could really be putting families in a pretty significant financial hardship. So rethinking what I had talked to you about with the elimination of, you know, those types of vehicles, I think something that would be more appropriate would to treat those vehicles like motor homes or RVs. If we're with the same types of restrictions, which are visual and for aesthetics, where we limit where an RV or a motor home can be placed, simply having that same restriction on semis, straight trucks, box trucks, and open construction trailers, I think would be more appropriate. And the concern is, I would really hate to put one of our residents in a financial hardship by having to find now private parking, now commute to their vehicle, potentially not be able to take on-call or overnight shifts. I just, that part really concerns me. And I think really isn't the whole idea behind this to not have driveways when you drive through your neighborhood to be kind of consumed with large commercial vehicles? I don't know, so I'd like to have a discussion about that. Maybe I made it a little more complicated than you were hoping, but my conscience, I think, got the best of me on this one.
Yeah, well, and I think
Hold on, we're-
the default kind of consensus I thought I was hearing from different folks was that C plates in all cases would be allowed. D plates, if they weren't a box truck, a semi, or a, you know, commercial van with a lot of, like, obvious commercial. But we would never go beyond D, and there'd only be 1 D plate allowed per premises. Never the, you know, the E, F, G, H, which are very much contractor, large, over-the-road type trucks they're just not residential in any place in America that has a zoning code. So, I mean, but if there's a consensus that you're gonna just say, we're gonna let even plates bigger than D, you will be an outlier to the rest of the state and the region. I wouldn't recommend above, you know, 1 D plate per driveway, but you get to decide as a board.
Chief Levan, do you want to comment at all? It's up to you.
Please.
Yeah.
Yes, I would love to comment
I
about
thought
this.
so. What's all right?
So here, I'm going to try to put it in a couple of different perspectives. So you may not this is actually a problem in the village that I have to deal with quite frequently. So typically, I think like what I hear is overall is good. Like, and I do know if you poll other communities, be it rural, semi-rural, or more populated, the consensus there, because I've already done this, is D plate, is about where they cut it off at. So I do like the option of if you can say, okay, there's no issue with Bs, there's no issues with the Cs, and, you know, we can allow D plates within reason, or however you word it. I think that's excellent. You cannot exceed D plates. You are opening a Pandora's box that you guys are going to regret doing, because I deal with it monthly here. I go to houses that they're bringing their box trucks their semis, their trucks towing large trailers that are commercial trucks. The neighbors do not like it, and I don't blame them, because I wouldn't like it either. And I'm not trying to take anyone's, if that's your livelihood or, you know, the way you make money, but you have to do it within reason to your neighbors, and we do have an issue with this in the village. I think what you guys are all saying, like it appears to be, is like trustee Boltner too. I think it's excellent with that kind of wording in it. Because here, I'll give you an example. So my patrol car outside is deplated through the state. So if you had a restriction on it, I wouldn't be able, well, I could, I'm exempt because law enforcement, but I wouldn't be able to take my truck and park it at my house. So I understand it. Other people are exempt anyway by law, so especially, I know this was brought up before, ComEd. ComEd's exempt because they're an emergency utility service. You couldn't obviously have a gentleman that had 10 ComEd trucks parked in his driveway, but if that was his job, because he's an emergency utility service, he can bring a larger truck home and park it there, especially if he's a lineman or he's on call for something. So there's exceptions to everything. So far, what I've heard, I think is good overall. I think when you get to that D plate, that is really where you do have to consider like cutting it off there. I don't think people sometimes realize how big D plates are. Like it can be on trucks, but like you're talking large commercial vehicles begin at D plates and work their way up. And I think it would cause a lot of issues. So like, I think for the most part, it is good, but you do have to have a cutoff somewhere. Otherwise, it's gonna tie our hands and we're not gonna be able to do anything with it, and residents are gonna be extremely upset.
Yeah, and the public comment was, I have a D plate because I have a large horse trailer, or I have a large RV that I need to pull. And that's where the thinking would be, even if you're, you know, running a stock car race trailer, you need a D plate, but you don't need two of them, probably. You need one. So we could try to appease most of the people without offending most of the people by what the chief has said.
All right, Tom Williams.
First of all, I just want to say to the people that were on the zoning commission, thank you, because I was at a couple meetings. It was brutal amount of work to go through it. They were all volunteers. I heard someone at one of the public meetings acting like they were paid. They weren't. They're just citizens. They live amongst us. They live in all these different properties. So I just want to clarify that right off the bat, and thank you for going through all this effort because it was difficult. And I don't want you guys and the commission thinking that what we're doing here is like saying like your work wasn't good. We're not. We're just trying to come up with a consensus of what we feel is best for all the citizens in the area. Not that you weren't, but you know, you got to keep in track too. We all have different backgrounds. So my background is mostly construction equipment and supplies. I sold to a lot of contractors. I guess my view in this is more, the more I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I just feel, you know, what you pull dictates plates in many areas. And I am in agreement with, hey, I would easily say one, okay, like D plate one. I think that's a good way of handling it. I think pickup trucks in particular, you know, there's whole, like Ford doesn't make a car. I don't know if they're going to continue to make a car. I mean, they're pretty much making all trucks now. Everyone's buying trucks. They're not using them as trucks, but what you pull dictates kind of what you need a plate for. So if it was something like D, you know, okay, the exception for D would be, okay, all pickups are allowed. I mean, what's the big deal? It's a pickup truck, okay? My only issue would be, you know, is it one? Yeah, I could get behind that. I think that's pretty prudent. I think it's common sense. I don't think anybody wants a fleet in the driveway across from them. You got to remember, too, that's one of the things we keep on talking about. We're talking about ordinances for, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the ordinances that we're doing for the village, if there's an HOA, let's say for Fox Mill, if their HOA says you can't do stuff, we're not
That's
usurping their HOA. You know, and that's even like goes back to the animal component. If you have an HOA, like mine, my neighborhood is on that rezoning of farmland, and I'll be honest with you, I can't have chickens, I can't have anything. I mean, I signed up to that when I went in there, and they'll come and say, hey, guess what, get rid of your chickens. So none of this allowance is allowing me to do anything. It's not changing any of the rules. All my rules are actually stronger than the rules that the village is passing. If I have a neighbor that occasionally puts a dump truck in his driveway, and what he does to get around it is he plows everyone's driveway for them for free on our street, and we all look the other way. For that one day, he brings it home. So which is interesting, but that's kind of where I'm at with the truck thing. I get the whole, I do have I did sell to a lot of contractors, and I know there's some people that talk too about, like, I had mechanics that worked for me that a lot of times we'd let them take their truck home, and they were H plates. They were full-blown Peterbilts with every part in our parts room, every piece of equipment they could use, and I get the whole, I'm restricting their ability to make a living to a point, but there's got to be somewhere, because where do we stop this plate thing? And I thought about it more and more tonight. I went through it, and I'm just like, I don't see where I think it's, maybe pickups are cool. Anything else, it's one D plate, or maybe it's just D plates on a pickup. I don't think most people have more than one. That's where I'm at with it,
All right.
at least on the trucks.
We're going to move over to Janet now. Yeah.
I don't really care how many pickup trucks you have, actually. If you got 2, maybe your family even has 3, I don't care. A fleet, obviously, this is a problem if you're running a business from your home. One of the things I've learned in this adventure is that there is a lot of variation to how plates are assigned to vehicles. And so one of the things I'm not very comfortable with is telling the police department that your only guideline for how to decide who is quote legal or not is the plate. That seems like it's problematic to me. And I've heard, and by the way, we only have 3 trustees here, but talking to at least one other trustee, I'm not aware of any consensus to do this by plates alone. It sounds to me like we're looking at a consensus that revolves more around the type of vehicle than the plate. And I think there's a general agreement that we don't care what kind of pickup truck it is, F-150, 250, 350. I just saw a 450 the other day. I didn't know they made this. Yeah. They go way up there. Yeah. 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 Sadly, that 450 was a baby dump, and so we wouldn't allow that. So no dump trucks, right? No box trucks, no flatbed trucks, a variety of different trucks like this. So it seems to me, and Chief Levand, if it's all right, if I can direct my question to Chief Levand, but is it a clear instruction to the police department to say that pickup trucks are okay, right? And we don't care how many numbers are after the F. We don't care if it's a dually or not. We don't care if it has writing on the side. Pickup trucks are okay. Trucks that are not pickup trucks is a different category of truck. And I don't know how we get that into an ordinance, but I think that's the general notion of what we're trying to get to, isn't it, for enforcement purposes?
It's a hard, listen, I can tell you guys what I think and like guidelines for, I mean, you're right. I mean, if you ask, here, I guess this is the easiest way to explain it to you. And then I give you guys the hard decision to decide how you want to do it. This is very, so a good point was made on the HOAs. Because I can use Fox Mills, a perfect example. They are way more strict than anything you guys decide that you're going to do for it. That's their right to do it, and they do it. But that is an HOA violation that they can deal with internally. Where we start getting into issues is, and we have this with another HOA too, where there was a commercial motor vehicle involved. I can look at what the wording says in our ordinance or code and go strictly by that. If I think it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I have to go by what it says. Because that resident is going to read the exact same thing and tell me I'm not doing my job because it says right here that this is what the rule is. So that's why I do think it's important to have some leeway, no matter what you guys decide. If you asked me, no, I wouldn't care. If it was my own personal subdivision and people had pickup trucks parked there, to be quite honest, I don't care if it was a commercial truck that a gentleman worked for a company, he's a plumber. Would that bother me? No, it would not bother me at all. Where we're going to have the issue, is like was said, is, and I understand why municipalities use the D plate overall, because that is like the distinguishing line on plates where it goes to be a commercial vehicle. Like, C-plate didn't exist years ago in the state. The state of Illinois came up with that plate. The reason they came up with that plate is because we're talking about things like towing trailers, towing boats. Like, that didn't exist. It went from B-plate and then it jumped. I can give you my opinion and say, like, if we don't have something that's clear into like what we can or can't enforce, you will have residents that say, this is exactly what it says. I want you to enforce it, which ties our hands, because then we do irrelevant to what my personal opinion may be on it. I don't know if that helped or not, but
Completely, thank you.
All right, last time, Nick.
Last time?
Yep,
Okay,
last time.
Thank you.
Got to move on. Yep.
So I guess I would regress then to still disregarding the license plates altogether. Just because of the fact that pickup trucks, we're talking the pickup trucks are okay. A regular pickup truck can have a D plate depending on what it's rated to tow. So you could have, 2 D-plated license plates in your driveway and it's just a pickup truck. So again, I think our intention is, we have a vision of certain types of vehicles that we're restricting. We just need to define what those are, and it's not D-plated vehicles. That's not the correct definition. We're talking about semi-trucks, box trucks, straight trucks, and open construction trailers. I mean, that's what we're talking about, and I think that, that's a very clear definition.
And generally, Nick, I would tell you that those are all above D. That you're saying, those are all above D. Police,
The straight trucks and the box trucks, I think might be D, and I think the semis and the trailers, probably different plates, yeah, 100%. I know that at our company, we have 2 straight trucks, box trucks, that are D plates. I drove through a mechanical contractor that's like very well-known in the area, has lots of trucks, and their pickup trucks, their cube vans, everything had a D plate. I mean, every vehicle, and it's because they may potentially be towing one of their large trailers, so their gross vehicle weight, the white sticker on the inside of the door jamb says 12,000 pounds, so that they can have a vehicle behind them and get pulled over and weighed, and I mean, they're rated to pull this amount of weight.
yeah, and that's why I thought your original discussion was D plates, but still exclude semis, box trucks, and, those.
Yeah.
Because
I
they
mean, and
could have a
that's-
D plate, but you don't really want to be looking across at a box truck or one of those vans, because you want people to be able to pull their horse trailer, their motorcycle,
Right.
hobbyist trailer, their stock car, or, a boat,
Right.
a large boat with the D plate.
And I did want to have a little bit of discussion about those others, but we did. So I would regress back to eliminating the C and D plates from the language altogether and just define what these vehicles are. I think it's very simple to define the other vehicles. I mean, quickly.
But it's hard to enforce. We need something that's easy and straightforward for the public to know and for our enforcement of, because every place I've worked, I've switched out of that county language of 3/4, 1 ton, because it leaves so much interpretation. It's not clear to the officers usually, or the staff, and it's certainly not clear to the public. Secretary of State defined D is very clear, and the stuff above D is obviously commercial and large and not fit for residential properties generally. Oh, sorry. I think Tom wants to jump in.
I'm not going to say anything, not a comment, just asking a question.
Sure, go ahead, Tom.
So you were saying that you said Ed Muncie brought up the idea of maybe D plates with just a limit to 1? As long as it was a pickup?
As long as it's a
Is that kind
pickup.
of, so he's saying basically pickup, limited to 1? Is that what he's kind of,
Not one pickup, but one D-plated pickup. You could have.
1 D-plated pickup?
Yeah, you could
Okay.
have other pickups on the
Okay.
driveway or SUVs. A lot of them are they're not As, they're Bs or Cs.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, last comment then.
I appreciate the difficulty from an enforcement perspective of trying to get good rules that the police or anyone else can follow. However, I think that there is you know, the trustees here, at least, have made it clear that the license plate mechanism doesn't work for us. And and I'm wondering whether this could be a something or something and type of situation. So, I've not heard from Chief Levand that he felt that he needed the license plate only, but that he felt that anything above the D was clearly an issue. So if you got into F, H, whatever plates, that was an issue. So it sounds like there could be general agreement that above a certain size is a problem, but below that, when you get into this C and D category, it's so squishy, and we've agreed that the license plate category, contrary to your assertion, with all due respect to Administrator Rooney, does not actually accurately describe the vehicle in a way that's useful. And so we've tried to come up with multiple ways, just in conversation. We've not asked, Attorney Forte to weigh in on it or anything, but, common sense ways that you can identify a truck that doesn't fit. This is a duck, duck, goose kind of situation, right? So we've agreed, pickup trucks, we don't care whether it's a C or D plate, right? And I'm not sure that 4 trustees are agreed on how many, but pickup trucks, okay. Other trucks, not okay. Trucks over a D plate, not okay. So, that seems like, that's the, the combination of the different things that have come up today. But I don't think that the C or D plate alone, the license plate categorization works. It hasn't worked for me from the beginning, and I don't think it's worked for some of the other trustees here from the beginning.
Yeah, real quick, and, Attorney Forte, they represent a lot, may be able to chime in here something better, but like, I know other jurisdictions that I've spoken with, and their common theme to it is D plate, and then they put in there, anything above the D plate, commercial vehicle. So they have those tied together, which makes it a little more easier for law enforcement itself. Again, you're not going to get your carpenter, your plumber, or anyone else that has an F-plated vehicle that's commercially wrapped, that's parked in a driveway, and most residents aren't gonna find that suitable. Like, there's gonna be issues with that. So I don't know if that's, I will leave it to Attorney Forte. He may know better than I do on it.
Sure. As Chief Levand stated, the problem is really one of enforcement, and more communities that have a lot more of a residential feel, tighter lots, more houses on a block, tend to completely restrict commercial vehicles, no matter what plate size. Some communities, and these are communities that don't have HOAs, our urban feel will even say no pickup trucks on the driveway outside overnight, whether they're commercial or non-commercial. My experience, communities similar to what you have here, I take Mattawa, for instance, as one. They don't speak to plates, but they do have a list of vehicles that are excluded, specifically commercial vehicles. There is some leeway, I believe, for certain types of commercial vehicles. I think pickup trucks and maybe small vans, like a 1500. What I'm kind of hearing is what you need to decide is what don't you want to see parked outside, and then work backwards from that. And this hybrid approach of restricting certain types of vehicles, trailers, flatbed trucks, box trucks, possibly including a plate designation may be your best bet. It's not going to be foolproof because there are going to be some exceptions, but then that will be up to Chief Levand and his officers to determine whether or not the ordinance would apply. And then maybe, after some time, you determine that there are some types of vehicles that meet some sort of loophole that you may want to tweak it a little bit. But to me, that kind of seems like the best way to do it.
Yeah, and we haven't heard from President, if you wanted to weigh in. I don't know if I think we're kind of almost 4 for 4 here on
On the C and D plates?
the pickups that are deplated, that are not of the commercial that you outlined, Nick, originally, the, could be what we'd prohibit, and everything else is allowed. And I guess there's not a consensus for the one, because somebody could have two horse trailer pulling deplated vehicles, because why not have both of your pickups legally able to tow your horse trailer if you own two of them? Or if your other hobby type thing. It would only make sense. To limit it to one might create a burden. But just keep it at D with the exceptions you listed could be, I think you'd have consensus there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the D plates should be allowed with pickup trucks, definitely. So that's just my,
But with the outlined exclusions that you stated.
yes, yeah. Do you want, maybe we
If you'd
gotta
say
move
that
on.
again, so that
Mhm.
we're all,
Mhm.
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, it's true, yeah.
I just was thinking there might even be a simpler way of saying it if we limited it to a maximum of one commercial D-rated truck or van. I mean, then doesn't that also eliminate the semi-trucks, box trucks, straight trucks? Potentially not. But what I had said the first time around was,
I think we'd get a lot of pushback on that from neighbors. That'd be hard to enforce.
yeah, so eliminating the plates, the C and D, correct?
No, you.
No.
Well, we're saying you
No.
can park a C and D plate on your property. but
Correct.
It's got to be a pickup truck, not a commercial
Yeah.
box truck, cube van.
And then there are no semi-trucks, box trucks, straight trucks, or open construction trailers.
Check.
So a painter, a painter who has ladders on his van, a painter has a van, and there's several that live in our community, so would that have D plates? Probably? Okay,
We keep discussing, you know, like the D plates and that, but the problem is, people are hearing D, and automatically they're assuming these massive vehicles. Again, I have a pickup truck that is outside that is D-plated, and that's due to like towing, things that go on it. So not every plate is just a massive, you guys are on the right path. Like, the restrictions of it, I think like Carmen, or Attorney Forte said, like, that's good. It's common sense things. But remember, we do, not knocking anyone, we do have residents in this town that all of a sudden I have 3 semis parked in their driveway, and I've dealt with it recently, and they wonder why their neighbors are mad at them, that they don't understand it. So it does happen. So we just need something, but I like where it's at right now. Maybe tweak it.
Jim, since you got to write it, what did you hear the consensus on C and D being allowed, but D with restriction?
Well, I'm actually kind of confused. So you want to do, you want to be, yeah, so you want restriction. So C plates are all okay.
how
So that's,
interesting.
C plates are okay. D plates, and all pickups are okay. Any type of pickup truck is okay. And then D plates would be allowed, pickup with the D plate, because we're allowing all pickups, I guess. Would any other type of D-plated vehicle be allowed then? That's where I'm a little confused right now.
Vans. Vans.
I'm thinking of vans, and vans
Correct.
is,
Vans and pickups.
yeah, vans and pickups. I mean, the trouble, you can define a pickup pretty well. You can define a bulldozer, a front-end loader. Vans get a little more problematic because there's just these humongous ones. And I've had to enforce this as well. And one town I worked in, it went by vehicle length and height. It was like the stupidest thing. And, because you're going to go measure it, or, yeah, I mean, you got to go on their property, you got to measure it. I mean, it was just like, yeah. So the thing with vans is they do come in different lengths, widths, heights. I think that's the kind of the odd thing. Everything else, you know, the straight truck, I could come up with a definition for, and I think it would meet your intentions, but the vans is kind of like an odd
Yeah,
animal.
because the
I mean, some-
Amazon Prime van,
Yeah,
I guess, is not really a pickup. It's tall and long.
But I wouldn't,
yeah.
That becomes a panel truck.
yeah, it's a panel truck. I wouldn't call that a van. I'm thinking of the classic painter's van, which
I know,
mean,
but we have to have it
You mean like a
noun,
Dodge
verb.
Hammer
We have to have
ladder.
noun, verb, noun.
You mean like a Dodge
Right.
Hammer ladders on it.
well,
The old
I've
Ford
used several.
Econoline
Yeah,
van.
this is their livelihood,
sure.
and I don't want to take that away from them. Or
Well,
just-
and when Attorney
yeah.
Forte mentioned whether any of this was foolproof or not, I was struck by the idea that I don't want it to be foolproof in terms of trying to catch everybody. That's not the idea at all. I want it to be flexible enough that most people don't find themselves unable to bring their work vehicle home, or whatever the case
Yeah,
might
it's
be,
their
right?
livelihood, and we don't want to stop that, that's for sure.
But same token, you want to respect people's residential neighborhood
Yes.
feel, too.
Mhm.
You've got to be cognizant of that.
Is it something you can research for us to just see if there's a word or if there's another word that came up with something like that?
I've already done, I mean, I've done this in most towns. I do use the plate, I think because it's simple. It's just, it's very clear. You got a D plate, sorry. You got a C plate, you're fine. That's my experience. The one town I worked in had height, it's like height and length. Another town prohibited racks or ladders. You have a pickup truck, but you couldn't have a rack with a ladder on it.
So
So,
you could say-
yeah, I mean, it's, there's
That's
just
how they
different-
get it. They say a D
D-plates only
plate
might give us
without
vehicles we
racks
don't
or.
want.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah, but, yeah, so, wait, I have looked at this, and yeah, I think that was part of the commission's, simplicity was part of the commission's idea behind going with the C and D plates, and I think that's why a lot of other towns use it too. I mean, you go out there, you got a D plate, sorry, I mean, you can't park it here, so.
But here you want to allow the D plate with some
Yeah.
specific restrictions. So I think we got to come up with those restrictions, and I think we'd have a good compromise. Because you do have a lot of folks that pull RVs, horse
Yeah.
trailers, other hobbyist trailers, and they need a D plate sometimes.
So I think we need to move on, so where are we at?
I guess we'll come back with some at the 14th to
Mhm.
see if we can get to, but we got a pretty good start.
Okay.
And then we could go on without the other two, but you do have 6:30 start time for a special meeting on the 14th to do 3 hours. That would be at 9:30 you would end. You could extend up to midnight, I guess, by your local rules. But I suspect, but you have to, at 3 hours, you have to make a motion of, the majority of the board has to say, let's continue for another 30 minutes or an hour. I cannot, if you want, if you so direct, I could, but I didn't, I think that was more tongue in cheek. But 3 hours on the 14th, and is there other issues besides what the commission has identified, the zoning commission? Because they kind of highlighted some of these that Jim has put in, Brown has put in, because there wasn't unanimity on some of these. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
if you have other issues, if you could send those to both James Brown and myself's email, so we can have a better chance to look them over and be able to answer questions and brief the chief if he's going to be brought in.
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment on the statement about development. That I think they're more newcomers to our community, and they hear the word development, and they probably go, we don't want another 3,000 development unit in our backyard, but that we definitely are not interested in any new developments. This was evident by the action that we took when the 3,000 unit development was proposed between Brundage Road and LaFox Road. We fought that. That consumed us, actually, for several weeks, trying to figure out what we were going to do. And
that was
And-
outside the village zoning
Yeah.
in our planning
exactly, but I think people have to remember that we're an open space community. We have a lot of Kane County Forest Preserve, we have Kane County Farmland Protection, those two into perpetuity. Campton Township Open Space, that's into perpetuity. And I think we're just really fortunate to live in a community like we do, and development is just not a word that we're interested in. I just want to make that clear to everybody. So. Sure, go ahead.
Mark, can you explain a little bit, just because we had a question on it tonight, about the open space that's private and how that's going to be handled?
The zoning map is by definition a description of a legal description of what is open space. It doesn't differentiate, and as Jim Brown's presentation showed, it's not designating that it's open to the public or it's private. It's just a legal fence, as it were, for analogy, around that property, making it very difficult to convert it to any kind of development. It's got some real restrictions, and you'd have to go through the LaSalle factor to change that zoning from open space to developing it to a subdivision or any kind of thing. Doesn't mean you couldn't put in an HOA that has open space, they couldn't put a clubhouse as a part of a Forest Preserve's golf course or a learning center. It'd have to be in keeping with the overall purpose of that. But it really is just a legal description of the land is open, and it's not meant for future use other than that open. So it's a layer of protection.
Okay.
And we have another map that we created that will go with this comprehensive plan to kind of parse down the different layers of open space in the comprehensive plan, what is aspirational and objective goals of the village. The zoning is very legalistic and meant for a very specific definition and must follow that. So that's why it doesn't differentiate between public and private. Because as he said, the definition and the map doesn't take away how someone uses their open space. You cannot go on the Forest Preserve and walk everywhere. You're restricted to trails and or times of day and different uses you can have. Just because it's open space doesn't mean you can ride a horse everywhere. There's places that you can, places you can't have motorized vehicles, and where you can. The owner, operator of that open space still gets to define that use, even though we think Forest Preserve, anybody, everybody can show up and go. They can't. The Forest Preserve still says how it's used. Our zoning is just protecting it from future land use other than open space.
Is that comprehensive map going to be showing those spots differently?
It does, and
Okay.
we can
Just wanna
then
clarify.
differentiate the various colors and designations in the comp plan, because it doesn't affect the legal aspect of the zoning code, and that's why we're trying to be very careful about the zoning code, and Carmen could add to that, I'm sure.
Right, exactly what Administrator Rooney said, that the map is just going to indicate whether they're private or public. Open space is one open space protection district denomination on the map. The comprehensive plan and the proposed map will likely set that out further, in addition to future potential open space areas that the village would consider, so.
I'd like to have Jim Brown go next, because he was starting to say something.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to elaborate on it
Okay.
because I forgot to mention that about the separate map that we had created. I think there
Okay.
was a copy laying over there that, yeah. Or back over there. So
Yeah.
it shows the public and private open space, but that's not part of the zoning map. I just wanted to declare that was
Oh, okay.
my point.
And then Janet?
I'm less concerned about the public and private aspects of open space in Fox Mill because I understand the private open space in Fox Mill to be buffer areas around the clumps of residential developments, and the public open space is for lack of a better word, the fairways in between the groups of houses. So I'm not terribly concerned about private versus public, because even within Fox Mill, I don't think that if you stopped 10 residents walking on the path, that 3 of them could tell you the difference between private and public open space as they were walking through it. So I'm not so concerned about that. I'm more concerned about land use, and my understanding when we're doing zoning and we're doing zoning maps is that it's not about ownership and it's not about private versus public, but it is in fact about land use. And so when we go up to Coron Farm and we look at a prairie there, or at Gray Willows or wherever, we look at a prairie, and then we go to Fox Mill and we look at their manicured sort of park within, parks within their HOA. To me, these are radically different land uses. They're both different kinds of open space for sure, but they're radically different land uses. No one is ever going to build an amphitheater in the middle of the Coron Farm Prairie, but someone might build a little amphitheater somewhere down on the fairway in Fox Mill. Someone might decide to put a little 9-hole golf course in there or something somewhere. So these are radically different land uses, and so because the land uses are different, not because the ownership is different, not because of public versus private considerations, but because the way the land is used is radically different in the 2 different scenarios, I would like to at least see some type of overlay situation where we can say, as we have the environmentally sensitive protection district, I would like to be able to say we have open space and we have this type of open space, which is defined by the township expectations. We have this other type of open space, which is defined by the subdivisions. Fox Mill is just the largest one, but there are others that have open space within them. And then there's open space that doesn't fall in either of those categories. But for me, to toss all of this into one basket and treat it not from an ownership or public-private viewpoint, but from a land use viewpoint, all is the same animal, doesn't make any sense.
Well, we defer to the lawyer. We went through this at the commission level many, many times, trying to parse that out. But at land use, as you're using the term, in the zoning text, has a legal definition. And that's what we're trying to do. Because the forest preserve, when they say open space, it could be row crops in many of their forest preserves. It's not always just prairie that's not
Well, we have a very
used.
broad
They-
land use
they
definition
do.
for open space.
But it's
incredibly
a
broad.
legal definition. Can you summarize what 3 meetings on this map issue?
Sure, and the zoning matrix in the ordinance has various uses that are allowed in open space, is permitted. A lot of things could potentially be allowed in open space if you want to include them as special uses. So they'd still have to come back to the ZBA and then to the village board for approval, but this was an animal that the commission had to really tackle, and the best framework they could come up with was, let's identify areas, as Administrator Rooney said, that the village and likely the residents don't want to see developed, that has either already been designated as open space by the township or private entities, and then give it a single designation, and then work backwards from there. So, and the Fox Mill example was one that came up, and I think even a similar example, I don't know if it was an amphitheater, it was a park, I think, was a question. Well, we have all this open space. What if we want to build a park? Are we going to be restricted from being able to do this, like playground, I'm sorry. And there were some, applauses from the crowd in instance, but if you look at the zoning matrix, that would be allowed. A playground's allowed in open space, because that's being, I believe it was a permitted use, but I could be wrong. So there is some anticipation, there was in the prior zoning ordinance, or the current zoning ordinance, for uses on open space, but very limited ones. And those are things that you could consider now. If there are other things that you think should be permitted versus special, this is the time to review that.
But the key is it's protecting the open space writ large, whether it be, the dam wall is a lot that's listed as open space. And so is some of the empty lots around Lake Campton. But it's open space, meaning it's gonna be difficult to develop it, but for the use matrix that has a limitation on it. You're trying to protect your open space, and that's why we added, because of many people on the commission wanted to add protection in the definition, that open space, be it any type, is protected and hard to convert from open space to anything except what is in the use table as a permitted use. The details and the different ways of defining the cemetery or a spray field as open space would be more in keeping with the comprehensive plan, because we don't want to confuse those type of things with the legal specific protection district of the open space. And that's just professionally and legally what we were trying to do. We're not trying to dismiss your concerns, we're just trying to make it a manageable legal document. Because the zoning code's a legal document. Your comprehensive plan drives your zoning code, but you can be much more aspirational, and it doesn't get into as many legal specifics as the zoning code does. It took 3 meetings to get everybody on the commission to accept what you were trying to say, Janet. And that's where we got to finally after 3 meetings.
Okay, Administrator Rooney did say November 14th is the date of our next meeting at 6:30, and we'll continue discussing the zoning ordinance and all the good work that our zoning commission did. And, yeah, so it's good to see you here, Ralph, too. Ready for closed session? Yeah, motion to go into closed session.
Motion?
Okay.
Second.
Tom Williams and Nick. Roll call?
Yeah, for the purposes of,
Oh, I got to read all that again. Oh. Okay. Oh,
for the
For the-
purposes of semi-annual review of closed session minutes under Section 2C21, and for pending or probable litigation under Section 2C11. And you may have potential action on the closed session minutes when you return.
Thank you. Okay, roll call.
Trustee Williams?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.